Welcome to Dev Game Club. We're off this week, so we're running an interview from Discord Game Club in which Biostats and Kaon interview Calamity Nolan. All of these are members of the fan run Discord, and if that interests you, you can find a link for that in the show notes. If this isn't your bag, then expect us to return soon. Take care.
Welcome to DGC Just Rhetoric, a podcast where Nolan and myself interview content creators. Today we have reformatted, and joining me as a special guest host is Kaon, and we are interviewing game developer Nolan Filter. You may know him as Calamity Nolan on the Discord. He's an independent game developer and the lead programmer and co-founder alongside Nathan and Chris for Up at Night Games. I'm your host Ryan, or Biostats on the Discord, and I'll let these two introduce themselves right now.
Yeah, hey everyone. I go by Kaon on the internet, and I'm your local Nintendo Entertainment System player and Twitch streamer.
Hey everybody, I am Nolan, Calamity Nolan, in the Discord, and I'm not hosting this week.
Irreverent Q to Calamity Nolan. Give us the backstory.
Sure, yeah, I've had a lot of handles throughout my life, like everyone. I think in middle school I was Lil Buddha. I'm sure I have a Yahoo account that's still that somewhere. That I realized was not so great, and then I was Irreverent Q for a while, because I really like words and language, and Q is my favorite letter. Yeah, I liked that. And then around 2019, maybe 2018, people started thinking that it meant I was associated with QAnon. And I was like, no, no, no. But it's hard to over-explain yourself for a handle, so I changed it to Calamity Nolan, which is something that I had changed my display name to on Twitter at one point. Was kind of flipping between that and Alolan Nolan from Pokemon Sun and Moon, some other ones too, but I just liked Calamity Nolan, so I went with that, and that has stuck for the last couple of years.
I'll be honest, I always thought the Q was for question, and so it was Irreverent Question, because you kept sending those emails to Game Club Podcast.
You know, people gave me lots of guesses of what the Q stood for, but my secret was that it didn't stand for anything. I just liked the letter Q.
Nice.
Played a lot of Scrabble in my youth, played in Scrabble tournaments in high school. It's a letter I like.
I think the first question is obvious: is how does a theater kid get started in game development?
Right. So yeah, I am, I guess, a reformed theater kid. I don't do much theater nowadays. But yes, absolutely. Growing up, I was in a lot of plays, multiple per year, up until college. And in fact, I went to New York partially because I thought I wanted to do theater. Turns out when you go to New York, there's a lot of people who want to do theater, and the competition is very high. So I didn't get booked in anything my first year there. But separately, I also have always been interested in games. And I, perhaps to my parents' chagrin, because we were not allowed to have video games when I was growing up, but I was always, making little like tabletop games by like cutting, pieces of paper out and building board games and doing, storytelling and doing all sorts of fun stuff. I had a secret Game Boy that my brothers would use against me when I angered them in retaliation and be like, well, here's where Nolan's Game Boy is. It's like, duh, come on. But yeah, so I always was big into games, always kind of knew I wanted to do game development. At that time, I thought it meant you had to go work for a big company, you had to go work for Nintendo, and that's how you did games. So I didn't really know how to get into it, and I thought that maybe a path in was through storytelling, through theater. And so I went to college for that, thinking I was going to do dramatic literature, and I still got a minor in that, but just it was very hard to get traction for that in my life at that time. Was also just separately taking computer science classes because it was something that I was interested in and enjoyed and was good at. And really, that's what helped me find my community in New York more than theater. So I switched my major to computer science, and then at one point I had a teacher pull me aside and just said, "You say you want to make games, why aren't you making games?" And a little light bulb went off in my head, like, oh, yeah, I can program. I can just make a game, right? This was around the time when indie games were first coming out, right? Like Indie Game the movie, I think, was in the pipeline at that point, and you were seeing games on Xbox Live Arcade and things like that, and it's like, oh right, there are small teams. There's examples out there of individual creators, small teams making games. They like are doing very well. So I started making games. Found some friends in college who were also interested in making games, and we started making stuff together.
How do you measure success for your games? Or how do you think about it?
So yeah, that's a both straightforward question and a complex question. The straightforward answer is we'd like them to make money, right? Like my ultimate goal through my game studio is to support us making games in New York and being able to take advantage of the very talented developers that also live here, right? So maybe not becoming a huge, the biggest game in the world, but absolutely being able to have a game studio, maybe mid-sized in New York, that can support ourselves and others. So that's definitely the ultimate goal. But for individual games, it is a little bit more complicated than that, right? Because our games up until this point have been mobile games, and so the monetization scheme for that, because you can't really sell a premium title, they all have to be free, otherwise people won't download them. There's been a race to the bottom in the mobile world, and if you sell anything, then the amount of players that you'll get will drop by 100-fold. So it has to be free. So our, metric for that is usually players first. Can we get a lot of people playing? And then we'll figure out how can we get money from them. We've tried a lot of different things over the years, but at this point uh, we don't like the exploitative processes that a lot of mobile game companies use. And so we're generally more like, if you like us, you can give us money, right? A tip jar and then paid expansions, so it's like very clear what you're getting. There's no way to like continually give us money, and no incentive to give us money on a certain time frame. So you're missing out, right? None of the things that will exploit people with addictive personalities.
So why do indie dev or smaller teams versus going to a big company and doing AAA?
So that's more of a personality thing for me. Although at this point, it is also, I think, a good career move. But I just don't like doing the 9 to 5 thing, and I never have. And I did it a little bit before going to grad school, and since then I've just been freelance full time. So working with a bunch of different clients doing different things, right? My biggest client is like I give them 3 days a week of my time, and then other ones I'll give, 20 hours a week, in addition to my own game stuff, in addition to streaming. So I don't know, I try and cobble together a bunch of different sources of income, teaching, but I don't know, I just like working on different things every day, rather than doing the same thing every day. And so this allows me to be creative in a lot of different ways. It allows me to choose what projects I want to work on, and it allows me to have a lot of flexibility in my schedule so I can, go to events that I want to go to, and I can, record a podcast in the middle of the day, for example, which is happening right now. So I like that. And then that's sort of the why indie dev, and then maybe the why not games industry AAA is because there's a lot of turmoil right now in the games industry. There's a lot of mergers and acquisitions that are resulting in layoffs. There's a lot of games doing better than ever that also somehow result in layoffs. We're at the end of the pandemic bubble. So the problem was when everyone was home in the soft lockdown in the US, then people were playing a lot of games. And so game revenue went up a lot in 2020. And a lot of investors and a lot of, board members and C-suite people saw this and said, great, it's going to keep growing forever, which of course is a completely unreasonable belief. But they spun up, more game studios, they spun up, or more game departments, I suppose, they spun up development costs, they hired new people, they acquired new studios, and now we're about back to where it was in 2019 before the pandemic, which is a reasonable thing to be at. And now all of these studios are saying, oh wait, it didn't keep going up and up and up forever. So there's a ton of layoffs, and in general there's a lot of disruption to the game development pipeline, in addition to other systemic problems with toxic workplaces. So it's just not where I want to be right now. With any sort of enthusiastic-based media, right? Like game development, people get into it because they want to make games. Then there's a lot of opportunities for exploitation. And there are people who very much take advantage of that exploitation, both in big studios and in small studios. So I think it's really hard to navigate. I'm someone who just wants to make games, right? I make games for my studio. I make games as a freelancer. I make games for game jams. And how do I create a space for myself where I'm not being taken advantage of, but I can also do the thing that I want to do?
So tell us about Up at Night Games. Tell us about your studio.
Yeah, I started that with some friends from college when I was in grad school getting my master's in game design. And we just thought kind of like, why wait? Let's do it now. And we put out our first game, I guess, 10 years ago now. So that was, in January of 2014, I think.
Congratulations.
Must have been. Thank you. Yeah.
Yeah.
So Circle Stop. And that was really cool. We got written up in Kotaku. We showed off at the New York Tech meetup. Got a 250,000 downloads. It was super cool. Didn't make that much money. So, but we made enough that we, put all that forward into the next game and hired an artist and everything. But yeah, we started off making games where we wanted them to fit into your life, right? They're games where you don't necessarily sit down to play them, but, they're on your phone. It has all these capabilities. What's something where, if you're waiting in line, then what can you pull out and play a quick match of? We did what we called the subway test with a lot of our games, where we wanted it to be not so punishing that if you had to look up to see if this was your stop on the subway, you wouldn't lose. So, can you play it one-handed in a semi-distracted state and still get something out of it?
You mentioned Circle Stop, but what about your other games? Did they have the same parameters, or did you sort of shift as you continued to make them? And please mention all of them so people can go get them.
I absolutely was going to. But yeah, so don't worry. But yeah, so my next game was Janky Bounce. And so that was also similar kind of arcade action. And yeah, just real quick, the pitch behind Circle Stop is it's a super simple one button game where there's a cursor moving around in a circle, and when it lines up with other circles, you have to tap the screen uh, to continue, right? And so if you tap it, then you get points. If you tap it and it's not lined up, then you get a strike. 3 strikes, you're out. And it gets faster as you go. And there's more, like, there's some multi target situations where there's lots of dots. There's a bonus dot that might pop up that's really hard to get. There's rails to grind on. But it's just kind of a way to make pretty colors happen with, good timing. And then we went on to Janky Bounce, which is infinite pinball. So you're in this like infinitely tall corridor, and you're launching upwards. It's kind of like you have a slingshot, right? That you're launching upwards. There's clouds that are bouncy. There's wind blasts to make you go farther. You have a superpower that you build up that allows you to blast through things. And there's an evil wave of water that's chasing you. So you got to get as high as you can as fast as you can, which is the goal in many situations. So that was less successful, but still a very fun game to make. But that also we were looking at the subway test to make sure, right? Can you look up and be okay, right? This is a game with sort of limited input, but it expanded dramatically based on your actions. And then we kind of shifted course from there. So the next game was a game called Imposter Droster. And I also love tabletop games and ran a weekly to fortnightly board games and bars night with my best friend in New York. And so we'd always bring a bunch of tabletop games around. We'd have a different one that we're featuring each session at a different bar, and it's just sort of a way to keep up with friends after college, after grad school, and just say like, hey, gonna be in this place at this time, stop by if you want. So what ended up happening is that because I was carrying a bunch of bags or a bunch of games around in my bag, is that I started adjusting them and modding them and simplifying them. So it'd be like, do we really need the entire board for this game or just a deck of cards, right? We can just bring the deck of cards. Or sometimes it'd be, we just need the deck of cards, plus we need a scoring system. So I'd write a simple app to do the scoring for it, or to randomize, something, or keep track of the players. And that's sort of what spawned the next 2 games we were doing, which is doing this blending of digital and physical together, where how can you have a tabletop social experience, but you don't need the complicated setup, and maybe you don't even need to be in the same room, right? Can an app just facilitate your gameplay? And a lot of other games have done this as well. I think probably One Night Ultimate Werewolf is the one that most people would be familiar with, where there's an app that like acts as the guide for you and tells you how to play, and it just is quick. But yeah, so we started making games like that, and the first one was Imposter Droster, which is a game where you have a group of people, and they are all drawing a picture together, one line at a time. So I would get I'd get the phone or the tablet or something, and I'd hit the button that tells me the topic, and it would say, you're drawing a unicorn or something, right? So I'd add a little bit to it, pass it to the next person, pass it to Ryan, right? And it'd say, you tap it, and it'd say, draw unicorn. So you add a little bit more, then you pass it to Kaon, and when he taps it, it says, you're the imposter. You don't know what the drawing is of, but you have to pretend like you do. So he then adds a little bit to it, and we go around, and then we have to, vote on who we think the imposter is. And the imposter is trying to evade detection. That was super fun to work on. We showed that at Disney, Disneyland in Anaheim. Got nominated for some awards. Showed that I think it come out in Play as well.
I've played that one with family and friends, and it is very fun. So everyone go check out Imposter Droster.
Oh, good. You have played it. I love that.
Yeah.
Yeah, so that one is still doing okay on downloads today, which is interesting. It like kind of dropped to a holding pattern, but the holding pattern has never gone down, so it's still getting a couple of downloads, I don't know, I guess dozens of downloads a month, which is interesting. And that one did pretty critically well, but again, didn't quite find the player base that we wanted. And then the most recent one is also a party game called Silly Seance. And the idea is it's a cooperative game. Everyone plays on their phone. And you are trying to communicate with each other, but you can only use a Ouija board. So you're moving a planchette around, and everyone else sees it, highlighting things like you're the ghost communicating with other people. And so you have to convey a, like, silly action for them to perform. It might say something like, you got to shake your phone or scream into the microphone or change a setting in the menus or something like that. And the only way that you can tell other people is by, very slowly and meticulously highlighting certain things on the Ouija board. And it's, changes over time. There's different, we call them last rites, is your secret message. And the board layouts will change. Some of them don't have all the letters. Some of them might have letters moving around. Sometimes it's in the dark, and you have to move candles to illuminate what you're looking at. But yeah, that one was super fun to work on as well, but didn't quite get the player base that we were looking for either. So that's, we're 4 games in, have had some modest successes, and are looking to the future now for what's next.
So I also played through Circle Stop and Janky Bounce, and they're relatively high score based. And I mentioned to you casually one time my high score and was just curious if you knew other high scores, and you seem to know. Do you obtain metrics from these games? And how bad am I at Circle Stop?
So for high scores, certainly, yes, there's a global leaderboard for both Circle Stop and Janky Bounce. I don't remember what your score is in Circle Stop.
Yeah.
But at least when I stopped looking, there's also people who like cheat, and so I'd sometimes have to go through and like manually remove scores that didn't seem reasonable. But yeah, the high score for Circle Stop was in the millions the last time I was looking.
That's incredible. That's some patience, yeah.
So Circle Stop, it like gets exponentially bigger. The faster you're going, the higher your score will be. Janky Bounce is entirely linear, so I think that those are more in the dozens of thousands range. That's just based on like how high you get, right? Like how many meters high you are before the evil wave catches up to you, the evil storm that's chasing you. But yeah, what's fun about that is almost immediately, right? Like when you're making a game, you get pretty good at it. But almost immediately players beat our high score. And sometimes I would watch them do it, and it's like, yeah, you're just a better player of this game than me, despite me having played this for, a year every day before you. Cool.
Is that bittersweet?
Oh, it's mostly sweet. I don't, care about being on the leaderboard, really. It's a little humbling, right? To learn that people have this skill set and are just, like, naturally good at things.
That's great.
Or maybe not naturally, maybe built up from, playing other games, but I've also played a lot of games, and I don't have this skill set.
Well, you've made other games as well. You've done game jams, things like that. Can you tell us about some of your solo projects?
Sure, yeah. So, of course, when I'm not working on my game studio and I'm not working on my client games, I like to relax by making my own games. And I don't know, a couple of the recent highlights, I think. Uh, there was one called Unmooring, which I made for the four color jam. So we got four preset colors and had to make a game using those. Um, and so I decided, of course, to make a fan game of Unpacking, which is a very nice, cozy game where you go into a room and you're pulling things out of a little cardboard box and arranging them in a room, and it's just kind of nice. Uh, and there's not there's like some light requirements to where things have to go, but there's no real goal uh, or puzzle elements. It's just when you're done with it, then you move on to the next room, and a story unfolds through the places that you're at in your life. So I, of course, tried to do that using dark rituals, where you're pulling out occult objects from a cardboard box, and you're trying to arrange them in such a way that you are, you know, doing some sort of unholy act. And once you get everything correct, then it'll activate and you move on to the next one. So that was very fun. It got written up in Kotaku Australia, which was cool, and I still get a lot of people just naturally finding that on itch because I think it shows up when people search for like unpacking because people are like, what are more games like unpacking? Uh, and then they get, I don't know, uh, concerned and upset when they play my game, which I don't think is like outright scary, but it is unsettling.
Its quirks really enamored me, though. Despite its subject matter, it was so, I don't know a better word for it. It's so quirky. I just wanted to see more after it was over.
Great, yeah. I would maybe revisit it as a fuller game at some point in the future. But it was, I don't know, I think pretty complete in its state. And I did all the art myself, and all the programming and design and everything. It's kind of why I like to do game jams, is I get to try out different things that I, normally don't, the roles I don't take on in more serious development. So doing the art there really cemented in my mind that I would never want to be the art lead on a game project. But it was fun to do for this, 2 weeks or whatever, or a week and a half. I don't know. That one was very fun. I also made a game called Kitten Caboodle, which was a game for, there's like a secret gift jam that I do with a group of people called Strange Pact every year, where it's like a Secret Santa kind of thing, where everyone draws someone else's name out of a hat, and you make a game for that one person. And so this was made for my friend Ale, who has two great cats. And so this was a little puzzle game where you have to prepare your cats for bed. And so you have to like get them onto the bed and hold them there. The idea is very much just, it's hard to herd cats. And there's a couple of different puzzle levels where you're using different techniques to get the cats on the bed. Like maybe you have to put a cardboard box on the bed to entice them to come over, or maybe you have to put a cucumber behind them so that they get scared and jump onto the bed. Again, that was a game I did all the art for. Very different style, but just I don't know. I like making puzzle games, and that one was a fun one. Another puzzle game I made was something I call Nolan Filter's Conway's Game of Life game, which is a puzzle game built around Conway's Game of Life. and I'm Nolan Filter, so it's my game. It basically gives you, if you're not familiar with the concept of cellular automata, it's a grid where you have certain rules that determine what's going to happen. So you have a bunch of cells in this grid, and they're either alive or dead, and they will, in the next generation, either stay alive, stay dead, or change state. They may die, or they may a new cell may be born. And so the rules are something like, if you're overcrowded, then you'll die. But if there's enough cells around you, then you'll grow. And based on these sort of simple interactions, you get something that immediately becomes very difficult for humans to predict what's going to happen. And I found that very interesting. So I made it for the GMTK Jam 2020, 2021, something like that, where the theme was out of control. And so you had to kind of use your your knowledge of what might happen in like 2 or 3 generations to match a picture. But I just like playing around with cellular automata because they're unpredictable, right? I think it goes to show that humans are very good at pattern recognition, but they're also very bad at thinking 2 steps in the future.
So one other one that I'll mention is Snow Job.
Sure, I can talk about Snow Job. That's another one for the gift jam. The idea is it's like a jigsaw puzzle, and you're building Snowflake, but you don't have all the pieces. And so you're using the fact that snowflakes have this symmetry, right? And they're reflected across multiple axes. So every time you put down one piece, it gets basically rotated, I think, 60 degrees 6 times. So you get to create these really interesting structures, and you're trying to recreate a particular snowflake, but I also just had fun moving things around and seeing what patterns emerged, kind of like a kaleidoscope that I added in like a, a screenshot button so people could make their own creations and save a PNG of them. That one is maybe too difficult, but I guess that's what game jams are for, right? Is experimenting and seeing like, oh, is there something here? And maybe not, but I still had fun doing it.
I'll tell you, that was easier than Conway's Game of Life for me.
Same. Blew through that one.
Interesting. Yeah, it is a shorter game too. Yeah, Conway's Game of Life game is, I think, probably the longest of all of those, but people have certainly gotten through it, and I think it usually takes like 45 minutes to an hour. But I don't know, it really goes some interesting places, and some of those later puzzles I like because they show off some patterns in Conway's Game of Life. There's like certain arrangements of cells that over generations will like move in a pattern. They're called flyers, I think. Right, so they're like constantly move in a direction. There's ones called rotators that'll just flip back and forth generations. So getting to play around with both the ideas of Conway's Game of Life and introducing players to that, and then building puzzles around that was very rewarding.
Where do you get your ideas from? Do you start with the idea of a game and then build mechanics for it, or do you think of a mechanic and then build a game, or is it both?
I mean, it's both. It's everything. It's uh, I don't know. I just always have ideas, and I think that that's something that is both a non-answer and a very true answer. I think that most people have ideas, and like when they're kids, and don't tend to continue to exercise their imagination. And at some point, right, they just stop trying to think of ideas. But I never have done that. I'm in a creative job, so that really benefits me. But I always have a game design moleskin that I carry around. I'm on my whatever eighth or ninth one at this point, and whenever I have an idea, I write that down. It helps me not necessarily to refer back to it, but it helps me sort of like sketch out the parameters of it, and then I just sort of let that. So I have a bunch of potential ideas all the time. Some of them might be mechanics, some of them might be settings, some of them might be emotions that I want a player to feel. And then once those sort of marinate and percolate in my brain for a while, they'll crystallize, and I know, okay, here's how I'm going to implement this, here's how I'm going to test it out. So, sometimes it happens on a very long scale, and sometimes, like with game jams, I check out a lot more game jams than I actually participate in, and if I see an idea, right, for a theme that inspires me, then I'll do it. And in fact, it's a problem sometimes because it'll become an intrusive thought where it's like, oh, yeah, actually, you know, Game Jam started yesterday. You just had your idea crystallized in your mind. Now you have to make it. That actually just happened with a 20-second Game Jam that's going on this month, where now the idea has crystallized in my head, and so I guess I have to work on that at some point. But I don't know. Their ideas come from everything, right? They come from movies I play, movies I watch, games I play, books I read, art I see, just walking around New York, talking to people. Their ideas are everywhere, and ideas are cheap, so write them down, and it's actually, then when I'm ready to make a game, I have a lot of options to choose through and can evaluate them based on what my goals are for that project.
Is there a particular genre or idea that you have that you're itching to work on that you haven't yet?
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot. I I think the biggest answer for this is probably fighting game. I've always wanted to make a fighting game, and it's just a very difficult type of game to program. And I actually tried at one point, got a little bit of momentum with a game called Super Beatdown Academy, which the basic idea was it's a bunch of, kids who go to fighting high school, very anime style, and instead of it's like Mortal Kombat, all of these fights kind of happen in their own universe or their own parallel branch of time. I thought that there's a lot of storytelling opportunity for all these games to be like diegetic, for them to be, they're all real, they all happen, and uh, what place has more drama and conflict than a high school? So it's, some of them could be fights between people as part of a sparring match in class, right? Their teachers are like, okay, you two have to fight. Or maybe it's, two friends who are wrestling after school. Or maybe it's a legitimate conflict that happens in the lunchroom. And you can build on these different fights by remembering, right, that the player has had this matchup before in this place, maybe, and have different sort of lines or scenes that unlock from that. And you can also get very specific with uh, these relationships between characters. And I thought that that was compelling for a fighting game. And also, I just wanted to be very silly.
So a visual novel, dating sim, high school sim slash fighting game.
Yeah, mainly the fighting game part, but now that Hades has come out, right? I think that the structure would be maybe similar to that, where like the right the roguelike exploration of Hades is kind of the core gameplay loop, and then when you're done with that, then you unlock certain things that further the story if you are interested in that.
One thing I'm hearing is that you have a strong narrative interest in storytelling, and based on the fact that you've made a whole bunch of mobile games and game jams, you don't have a whole lot of space to put that sort of energy for story and narrative. Is that going to be a larger part of some of your stuff moving forward?
That's a good question. The short answer is no, but that is something that I'm interested. There are some games that I'm working on that have a much bigger story focus, and I guess from my perspective, I'm more interested in sort of like setting and world building things like that than more character arcs. Like my games don't usually have a character, but they do have uh, I think a strong setting usually. So that's how I like to interact with that, and also the mechanics tell the story, right? The players tell their own story of playing the game within that setting, which is more of a, I guess, design based approach than like an art based approach. But certainly, some of my co-founders, want to do more explicit story-based stuff. I think that there's also reasons we may want to do that from a business standpoint, because those have a very uh, that demographic of people who like visual novels tends to like a lot of visual novels. But I don't know. That's not the only reason, but it is. You want to look at an idea through a lot of different lenses and see like what are the pros and cons of this, and so probably yes, there is a game coming out that we're working on in the near future that will have a strong story in it. But yeah, that's not necessarily my focus as a creator.
We were talking once, and you made sort of a remark, and it stuck with me because now I sort of think about you in this light. Because we were talking about people coming up with ideas and programming sort of um, tied together. And I think somebody offhandedly had said, like, I only think about that at work. And your response was, I never stop thinking about creating mechanics. And I think that goes with you carrying the moleskin around. And it's coming through here in the interview itself. It does seem like you're constantly creating ideas that maybe you could use.
Yes, absolutely. I just love creating. I don't know. It sounds kind of silly, but that's what I love to do. And right, games are my creative outlet, and so that's the thing that I want to be doing with my time that helps regenerate me. It would be nice if I got paid more to do that. So I'm working on some different strategies for getting that. Um, but you know, even if my game studio fails, then I'm still going to be making games. And, I figure out what's the biggest scale I can make a game with, my budget and time and resources available. Is now the right time to do something. I am always talking to people who I want to collaborate with. I'm always, have a bunch of projects that are on the back burner. I'm in pre-production for 13 games right now. So it just is it's I don't know, it's my life. It's what I think about. And I also think that the way my brain works is that I figure out the like parameters of a problem. And then that's a good time to take a break, right? This is something that I do for freelancing as well, for teaching, for a lot of things in my life, where it'll be like, okay, I've identified what the problem is, and then I can switch to something else and work on that, and my brain will still be working on that problem in the background, right? So this is, I think a lot of people have had like shower thoughts, right, where you aren't directly working on something, but then when your brain is distracted with something else, it's like, oh, there's the answer. And so I figured out a way to to sort of trick my brain into doing that, and like set up the correct conditions for it to try and do that. And so, yes, I am always thinking about mechanics, even when I'm not consciously thinking about mechanics. I have set it up so I'm subconsciously thinking about mechanics, right? Uh, it's what's stuck in my brain, and it's never gonna get out. So that's who I am, I guess.
Speaking about who you are, I don't think it's any secret that you're queer. You don't advertise the fact, but it's also not something that you hide. Given the history sort of behind development as being this frat house bro attitude in nerd culture, have you found that being queer has sort of been a disadvantage?
It is a core part of my identity, and you have correctly noted that there is especially in tech, especially in games, and especially in like bigger development, there is this very toxic masculine environment. And, a lot of minorities push back against that in a lot of ways. That's also a reason maybe why I'm more interested in working with, smaller teams, indie games. Something that I have a lot of hope for that is changing in the landscape. There's opportunities absolutely for queer people making games. There are niches there. Every year I help promote the Queer Games Bundle on my stream. I do a month of streaming just queer games, and as many as I can, which is super cool to give back to that community in that way, and get to meet a lot. I actually randomly was at a party on Friday and met someone who had made one of those games. Small World.
Which game was it?
It was Fishing for Average Caucasian Boyfriends, which was a game that I loved. And, just talking to someone who I'd met for the first time, they're like, oh, yeah, I made this game. I was like, oh, my God, I played that. It was great. So, yeah, it's nice to have that community in that way. And there's certainly you get a different perspective, right, on the way the systems of development work and the systems of the game industry work. And I think having that kind of step back and perspective is very useful, where it's like, oh yeah, not everything is made for you, right? The very Nintendo driven games are for boys is a long time ago now. And there are people who are building games for everyone. So I'm happy to be a part of that. And it's, you say I don't advertise it, but I also dress like a stolen car. So I think most people can guess.
So I do want to slightly transition here from sort of you as a developer, and think about more of the industry as a whole and sort of the philosophy behind some of the stuff. And hopefully at this point, people have heard our interview with Michael Betts, because I thought there was a lot of insight in that one and how he set up and run his studio. I just want to sort of ping you for your thoughts on how you would set up a studio that was, maybe a little bit larger than you are now. What is your philosophy for running it? What would your goals be? That type of thing.
Sure. So this is something that I think about a lot, right? Like, how much money do we need to get more people in? We already hire contractors for almost every game, usually doing art, sounds, marketing, things like that are kind of are outside our core competency. But I would write a studio where it is a little bit more collaborative. and we can bring people in and pay them not just for their expertise in one area, but in multiple areas, right? So it's like, whatever, you are a great artist and you're a great sound or a great game designer, right? You're a great level designer. You're something like that, right? And I think that really bringing people in and creating this collaborative environment allows you to get something that's greater than the sum of its parts. So in some ways, I, have my ideas that I think would make great games. But in other ways, right, I don't really like working by myself. And so the more that I can sort of refine those ideas through, you know, through talking with other people, bouncing them off, or, you know, replacing them with better ideas that other people have had, then I think that you're just going to get a better product. So I'm always happy to be, someone who can come in and say, like, here's an idea we can do, but I'd really much rather kind of stand back and help people make their ideas work, right? I think that I like doing code. I like teaching programming and computer science, but for me, it's more of a means to an end than something that I really need to do. So I would probably be more interested in a managerial and or mentorship role that helps build a studio that can not just create great games now, but create great games for a long time.
What did you think about sort of Michael's philosophy on I just want to make this game, get it out, and take it as a learning experience?
Oh, I think that that's absolutely the way you have to do it. Right, a game has to come out at some point. You hear all these stories about game developers, right, who spend like 10 years making their perfect game and then release it. And you only hear the ones that are successful, but for each story of, a Stardew Valley, there's 100, if not more, stories of people who just never put their game out, who never, uh, you know, who never got to the point where people could even see it. And I think that that's a mistake. I think that, right, your game is never going to be done. It's never going to be perfect. Uh, and especially now, you can always update it if you want. But I think as soon as possible, if you can get it in front of players and start iterating on it, then that's what you want to do. And then at some point, you need to decide this is what it is. Uh, Ideally, that's based on, your own internal decision and not something external like running out of money or, a date that needs to be met, right? Then you start making bad decisions. But I think that you do need to figure out, okay, this is when this game is ready to go. And also, there's a saying that the last 10% of game development is 90% of game development, which is true. Like putting things out is a very difficult process, and there's a lot of overhead you have to do, a lot of things you got to figure out, just to like appear on different store platforms and publishing and marketing and and asset generation for titles and promotion and everything. And I think that you also need to get good at that if you want to be a studio, right? So put it out there, go through start to finish. It can be small. Our first game was very small, and it still took us, a long time to get to a point where we thought that it was good enough to go out, and we learned a lot from it, and we made a little bit of money.
What do you think of the overall state of the industry? You touched on it a little earlier with all the firings and the acquisitions and so many mergers. It's sort of almost a few conglomerates versus lots and lots of AAA makers. But then at the same time, there are tons of indie sort of stuff going on. So, what is your sense of the scene overall, and where do you think it's heading?
I mean, right now it's not good. We're kind of reaching a breaking point in AAA studios where the price of development has gone up so much that it is unsustainable, right? There's almost no way to make back your development costs when you're spending whatever hundreds of millions of dollars, right? Like GTA 6 has cost over $2 billion, I think, to make. And so they might be the biggest game in the world. There's a, non-trivial chance they will be, but it's a lot of sales you need to sell to get back $2 billion. So, there's what we're going to see is games that are the scope of games keeps getting bigger and bigger and bigger. For whatever reason, all games are open world now, and they just feel unfinished to me. And they feel unfinished to a lot of people, but for me, I kind of view game development as this process where you keep adding stuff until it feels fun, and then you take out everything that's unnecessary, right? There's an editing process that you need to go through to make it simple. And a lot of games just get to the point where they've added enough stuff for it to be fun, or maybe not even all the way there, right? And so you are seeing a lot of AAA games with a lot of bloat, a lot of just like big empty areas that I don't think are very fun to run around in. Right, with a lot of mini games and side quests and things that are kind of throwaway, just so that they can get up to like 100 hours in length. And then again, I guess we've just raised to $70 for AAA games, but that's still not very much in comparison to, whatever, if you're playing a game for 100 hours. So there's some math that isn't making sense on the AAA scale, and it's gonna crash soon. I think it's already perhaps crashing. So we'll see what happens there. We, right, have just gone through this period where all of the mid-tier studios have disappeared. There's basically none anymore. But now small studios, indie studios, are getting bigger. So I think we almost need another word for indie, because what indie now means is like it's a team with a big budget and a publisher, which to me is not independent at all. But whatever, that's fine. It has pixel art, so I guess that makes it indie. Right? You even see it at like the Game Awards, right? Dave the Diver was called an indie game, even though they don't call themselves an indie game. By no metric are they independent, and they're like, well, but it has pixel art, so I guess it's an indie game. Very weird stuff. And I'm someone who thinks that even like the idea of an indie publisher is kind of an oxymoron, right? Like I'm all for giving money to smaller developers to help make it possible that they can release a game, or help accelerate their game making process. But it's not, when you're comparing a like self-funded, truly independent small team versus some of these big games that are like quite big now, then it's very difficult to lift up the smaller developers there. I think that's something that we're losing. Although, I don't know, Balatro was nominated for Game of the Year at the Game Awards this year, which is a single person primarily, and that's cool, I guess. I mean, there's a lot of other indie games that were not nominated this year, and I think there's a lot of AAA games that maybe should not have been nominated that are on the list, but it's, the Game Awards have never been the best at at I don't think their politics about, the quality of games are very good, but I do think that they are a useful tool to see sort of the broader state of how the games industry thinks about the games industry. But yeah, so that's the bad part on the the game industry side. But it is legitimately encouraging, I think, to see so many indie developers now, right? And there's a lot of indie developers who are banding together and supporting each other. That's super cool. There's a lot of like resources being made available for cheap or free, and you even see games uh, like Among Us. They're spinning up their Outer Sloth fund to help fund indie games. That's super cool. So I like seeing people giving back. Um, we also have a problem, I think, where there's no money for really anybody in games right now. And what little money there is going to these indie developers who are ex AAA, who are spinning up studios for the first time and, you know, getting funding to make a game that is the same as the AAA game that they made 10 years ago. I don't know if that's a necessary component of the industry, personally. Uh, and it really stagnates where we are. But we're moving forward. We're in a transitional period for the games industry, and I'm hopeful that on the other side, it'll be better for everybody.
Are there any notable successes or failures of those former AAA developers that stand out to you? I'm interested in your take on this because I can think of a couple of Kickstarter campaigns in the past that have been both successful and failed miserably.
I mean, on both sides of that, I guess you got I think Bloodstained Ritual of the Night Kickstarter. It's a pretty good game. It kind of was like, what if we made Castlevania Symphony of the Night again? And I think they did a pretty good job of keeping that feel and then also putting in a couple of twists to make it feel fresh. Uh, Although I just don't really personally like the 3D in 2D style, the like 2.5D style. I think that it looks very ugly because you don't control for lighting as much. Um, then I don't know, the other big one that I was thinking of immediately was Mighty Number Nine, and Red Ash, Redash,
Yeah.
uh, which one of those didn't even come out, and Mighty Number Nine did not really recapture the feel of Mega Man, I think, very well. So that felt a little bit more. Uh, you can only judge the product, but it certainly seemed like it had a troubled development process, especially because they're spinning up a brand new team. But also, I feel like a lot of people are fans of Mega Man and should kind of know how Mega Man should feel. But yeah, it just didn't really come together, I don't think. So
I'm curious what you think what that does for small or mid-sized studios. Yes, they do create new studios, but is this a positive change overall? Getting um, maybe getting some of that money away from like a big name like Capcom who makes Mega Man over to a smaller studio. Is that good for your industry? Is that bad?
it's Capcom isn't they're not competing for the same money, basically. Right? The Capcoms kind of have their own channels to raise money. For things like Kickstarter or for indie publishers, right? They're not gonna give it to Capcom anyways. So it's kind of a lateral move. I think that in general, it's good because it helps kind of retrain consumers to pay for smaller games, which is something that we need to do kind of across the board in the world right now. Is that like you need to pay for things after, whatever, 2 decades of venture capital and private equity basically destroying any media infrastructure that we have. So, and I think that that's maybe good. Do I care about these individual people getting money? Maybe not as much. And I also think that for indie publishers, right, like they will go with and understandably, right, they'll go with a pedigree versus an unknown. And so it just makes it even that much harder, right, to break into the games industry, right, even as an indie, if who you're pitching against are people who, have made the biggest games of yesteryear. But, it's all takes just a redoubling of effort to help raise up, the smaller developers. And I think that doing so, which is happening a bit, could definitely happen more, but doing so will make it a healthier industry in general, especially because these, unknowns, right? The smaller developers tend to be marginalized people and people who don't have the same opportunities as these big names. So you get a much more interesting perspective on game development that way.
So you mentioned games getting smaller. What about your thoughts on scope creep in games and in projects in general?
I am not for it, I guess, is the short answer. It's, I mean, in some ways, it's a natural part of an iterative process, right? So you look at what's working, what's not working, and you need to come up with new ideas to fix what's not working. So it's totally understandable why it happens. You and sometimes I think that it ultimately will lead to a better product. I'm thinking about if you haven't watched the making of Psychonauts 2 documentary, there's a part in it when basically they're like getting ready to ship the game, and Tim Schafer's like, "Oh, but we need to add bosses to the game," and I think he was ultimately right. But it's just a weird way to look at it. It's like, oh, we forgot bosses. Oh no, right? We need to increase the scope of this and build entirely new systems to handle, you know, these big bespoke creatures that you have to fight. So, it you have to balance it, right? Like what is actually going to be necessary and spend that extra time and resources when you think it really will benefit it, and then maybe don't when you think it won't. I think my counterexample for that is with Cuphead. They delayed that game before release because they wanted to add in all of these like sort of run and gun levels in between all the boss fights. Right, this is the problem where they said, "Oops, we only had bosses," so it really is the opposite. And I'm not sure that that really added a lot to the game. It was a little bit of variety, but I don't think anyone's favorite parts of it, and I'm not sure anyone was like, it's like, oh boy, so glad we had the run and gun levels in between here. So I don't know if that scope creep was worth it on that point. So, you know, I guess avoid it if you can, but don't be afraid of it.
I'm with you on the Cuphead. The run and gun sections are just fine, but they're probably the weakest part of the game. There's not nearly as much style and energy in those stages as you can tell as they put into the boss fights.
Mm-hmm.
So that scope creep, it can lead to crunch time. And have you ever had to crunch for a game's release? And kind of what are your thoughts on the necessity that crunching kind of has happened in the industry?
Yeah, so I mean, I'm a freelancer, so I've certainly worked, weird hours, and a lot of them. But that's mainly by my own scheduling. I have been asked to to kind of crunch more, but I've usually been able to push back and sort of rescope instead of crunch, which is something that I'm good at as a freelancer. But in general, no, I don't think there's any situation where you have to crunch. And I think that there's a meaningful distinction between like working extra hours occasionally and like the sustained extra hours that like crunch really is, and then like over an even longer period where it becomes a death march, right? Like those are absolutely inexcusable and reprehensible, right? Like you need to change the scope of your game. You need to cut stuff if that is what's happening, or you need to change the timeline, right? Basically, uh, you you can't choose the velocity of work and the deadline of work at the same time, right? You can either work as much as you can, and then when that product is finished, then you release it, or you can say whatever we have when we reach this point is what we're releasing. So yeah, there's no reason to do crunch, in my opinion. Like certainly, yeah, I've worked extra hours to do stuff in my life, but that's not the same thing, right? Sometimes things come up, and you got to put in a little bit of extra effort uh, to get it done. But if it's scheduled, then that is a failure on management's part to realistically release a game, and it's exploitative, right? Because people don't generally make more money for crunch; they get paid the same amount to do more work, so they're actually getting a pay cut in addition to it ruining their health and relationships, and not even making a better game. So no, there's no reason to do that ever. And beyond it being something that we should get rid of in the games industry, I think it should be illegal. And I think that, uh, you know, studios and companies that enforce that should face consequences.
Please unionize.
Yes, absolutely. That's another thing that makes me hopeful for the future of the games industry is there's a lot of like last year there was a lot of union forming. This year there's some union actions. Uh Hopefully next year there will be some union wins. We're not quite there yet, but it's moving in the right direction, I would say.
What's your stance on the politics in games? Are you on the side of every game is inherently political at some point, or are you keep politics out so people can be entertained, I guess?
I I like that you asked me this as if it's a reasonable position to say that games are apolitical.
I was totally set up.
Yes, of course everything is political and the decisions you make. It's like when you're making games, you're building a world from scratch. You can have anything that you want happen. And so if you are choosing to recreate systems that exist in the real world, then you are making a decision about how that world should work, right? It is absolutely political. Uh, Realism is a political choice. And side note, I also think that realism in games is boring and from like art style to systems, like why would you ever want that? Um, but yeah, no, of course everything is political, and of course the choices that you make uh, should be engaged with, and people can say I like this decision or not, but it is a decision.
I think there's a few topics that you can sort of get Nolan going on, and one of them is the politics. One of them is open world games, and He so far has avoided both those traps.
Good work. Good work,
Uh-huh.
Nolan.
But now I'm sucking Kaon in. So in our Kaon interview, we briefly touched on sort of pirating games, but I wanted to get into this idea of the preservation side.
Mm-hmm.
And so I want to sort of get Nolan's from not only game designer and developer, but now he has a legacy of having games in the world for a decade
That's right.
and where he sits on this. And then I also want to sort of incorporate Kaon's emulation piece of preservation, especially with the equipment that you work on.
Mm-hmm.
Sure. Yeah, I can talk about from my perspective. It's really hard to keep a game functional, right? Like preservation is important because we need to create the scenarios where a game can still work. Like my mobile games, not only uh, do the Apple App Store and Google Play Store keep uh, you know updating their own system so that my games are not playable on newer systems, which is really makes no sense to me why they wouldn't put in the effort to make their OSs that they push out every year legacy compatible. Um, but also, they have new policies where there are quote unquote neglected games where if it hasn't been updated in the last year, then they will remove it from sale. So I have to update and maintain my games, push a new build every single year. And right, that's 4 games, so that's a lot of work. And sometimes they have I don't even get to schedule that maintenance. I usually try and do it in January. This last year, Google Play said, "Oh, we have a new thing right now, and you have 2 weeks to update all your games." Right, I was able to appeal and get another 6 weeks on top of that, but still, that is unscheduled maintenance that I have to fit into, my work schedule. And it just doesn't make any sense to me, right? Like it's really hard and I have to update my tools to be able to build these, right? It's not just like you can make another build and then send it off, right? I have to update Xcode and make sure I have a new device that it can, play on. Also, updating Xcode involves updating my, you know, iOS version, my Mac OS version, and Xcode. Uh, and then probably my Unity build version and any libraries that are within that, and then testing it out, making sure that it all works, right? So it's a nightmare. A couple of years ago, I started putting my game projects in a what I'm calling free play mode. So I've stripped out basically everything that communicates to an external library and just have everything unlocked, right? So there's no payment or anything. And it's just basically how can I make this the easiest possible way to update? Which sucks because, I'm closing off functionality which used to exist in the game, right? Like there's no global leaderboard anymore for Circle Stop because that needed to communicate to a third party. And it's just too hard to keep maintaining that library and updating it every single year. Uh, there's no way to get paid for these games anymore because it has to be free because it's mobile. And so I had to take out all of the in-app purchases, right? Because that's another library that needs to be updated every single year. And just like it's so much active work to keep a game alive nowadays. And you'll see this uh with web as well. And even with PC, desktop and Mac games, sometimes they'll just stop working with an update. And who's in charge, of keeping these games updated? I am a solo developer, so I can do that, right? It's like very clear who the work falls on. But with some of these companies, the studio might not even exist anymore. So it's a nightmare. Games preservation is super important. And so I think that, right, even if it's not keeping every game in a playable state, then making sure that there's like high quality videos of people playing it, right? Of exploring what the systems are, right? I think that like Twitch actually is becoming a very important tool, Twitch and YouTube, for games preservation. Because for online games, let's say, for Among Us, for example, even if it's playable in whatever 50 years, if you have no one to play with, you don't really have a good record of what that game is. But because it was so popular on Twitch, we have a really good idea of the systems that people engaged with in that game. So it's multi-pronged. I would really like to just like make a game and leave it out there, but it seems, it's not where we are anymore, right? And all the Wii U's are getting bit rot, and the websites that used to have games don't exist anymore. So this work is even more important than it's been in the past.
Yeah, the Wii U released 12 years ago, and it's already a console in my own home that doesn't function the same way it did when it was new. It's almost unusable because it's just so slow to react to anything. I start a game and the performance is atrocious. 12 years that lasted, maybe even fewer. Going back as far as, I said I play a lot of Nintendo Entertainment System. Without emulation, I don't know how these games will ever be playable again. To this day, I have several Nintendos that are fairly resilient. They still work now, but they're not going to work forever. And even in the Nintendo Entertainment System world, the NES world, we already have other hardware systems available. You can buy a third party Nintendo Entertainment System. The Retrons, those are the kind of lower caliber ones, but there's like the Analog NT, there's the Misters, but all of those that I've listed are all hardware emulation at some point. So they're not replacements. They're not Nintendo Entertainment Systems. They're hardware emulations of the NES. And there are compatibility issues, which is hard to even believe. But because of some of the advanced features of some of the cartridges in the NES, they're not fully compatible with every console out there that says it can play NES games. So without the ability to take the software out of the cartridge and emulate the hardware, we've almost already lost the ability to play every Nintendo Entertainment System game on third-party hardware, on non-original, not first-party hardware. So emulation is necessary for preservation if you want to play the game. I liked your mention of Twitch as a form of preservation because we can't replicate the day a game released. I can't be back in 1985 again, but I can give you a genuine first playthrough of a game on this day, and it can be an out of box experience. Yes, it's not 40 years ago, but it's an out of box experience the way the game was made, just person, game, controller, and Twitch gives that experience to everyone who can watch, not just the person who has the hardware in their hands. So that was a really interesting point you made about Twitch videos being preservation as well.
And I'm absolutely interested, Kaon, in something you mentioned the other day, which is you want to make the chipsets for NES consoles available open source, which I think is a really cool project.
Yeah, so some people are out there doing that for money and profit already. There are a few businesses that if you wanted to create a fairly rudimentary NES game, they sell a printed circuit board that you can program, and put your game on it, and you can make your game with their circuit board. But there are so many varieties of hardware that were inside the NES cartridges that not everybody knows about. All of them look relatively the same on the outside, a gray, big boxy cart, but there are so many varieties of hardware in there. And I think it would be important, and this is something I'm capable of doing, but it would be important to create replications of those pieces of hardware that are inside the cartridges. I'm not saying that we're copying the software in there. I'm not saying that we're making that software available. I'm saying the ability to replace that hardware, if it were ever to fail, would be there available on the web, and preservation wise should be widely available, free to anybody who wanted to be able to make or replace or repair the hardware that they had, whether, in whatever state it was. But yeah, there are many variations. I'm holding one in my hand, which isn't great for the podcast, but there are many variations of the circuit board. And the one I'm holding is just palm sized, but the NES cartridge is hand size, and they can get that big. The circuit boards inside them can vary from very small to relatively large.
Nolan, when you think about games moving forward, in the back of your mind, are you constantly now thinking about how do I preserve them? Like, can you set things up a priori to make that easier down the line?
No, not really. I think that is a part of the process, right? That might be when I'm getting a game ready to release, right? That is, I'm definitely thinking, okay, what are ways that I can make this, the most accessible to the most number of people, and are there things I can do to help ensure that it will work beyond my ability to maintain it? But there's not really a lot you can do in some of these cases, right? Like if I'm releasing a mobile game, then I'm always going to be at the whim of whatever OS they're on. So sometimes it is, documenting my process in my games, re-releasing on other platforms, right? Like I think we're going to release a version of at least a couple of my games on itch for the Android version, because you could sideload it onto an Android phone, and if it works, right? And try and prepare that. Made different versions of Circle Stop and of Silly Seance that are playable on desktop, so that at some point, right, we can release those or make sure there's some version of it that's playable. In general, though, right, these games are meant to be played on mobile and built around the mobile capabilities, and so, that's, you kind of have to look at what's best for the moment as well.
So I have a question that's sort of split down the middle for the two of you. So the endings part will be slightly different. But I'll start with Nolan first. Do you think about games as your legacy?
Oh, that's deep.
Woo.
I do, right? I think that's my that's sort of what I've dedicated my life to. I think about games, I make games, I play games, I stream games, I help others make games, I talk about them on podcasts. I got my master's degree in them. So yes, I think that is a big component of what my legacy is going to be. I hope it's not necessarily the only thing, because there's other things that I also like to do, but that's is sort of my life's work. So I suppose yes.
Cam, this is slightly. Oh, you want to go ahead? You have a comment?
No, you go right ahead. Yeah, that was a great question.
Sorry.
No.
Now you say what you think my legacy is.
I think I love the shirt you're wearing. It might just be your presence on Twitch Yeah.
Kaon, it's a slightly different question for you. You have this ability to maintain equipment that's past, I would say, like past its prime at least.
hmm
And it seems that you take joy in doing so. And so, do you think that not just playing the Nintendo games, but preserving the equipment, the Rod the Rope that goes with it? I'm
hmm
talking about taking the NES and making it RGB compatible, right? These are things that are not inherent to the system itself.
That's right.
But do you view as maintaining those things and expanding access as part of your legacy?
Yeah, when you asked Nolan about his legacy, I really made me think about what we do on Twitch and how it's evolved. When I started on Twitch, I was just playing the games that I had always wanted to play on the NES that I had owned but never completed. And then slowly that became, I really should have the manual for the game because the game was intended to be, you have to read the manual to know what all the features of the game are. These games back in the 80s didn't tell you everything in the software themselves. So yeah, we started scanning in manuals, and then people would tell me, "Oh, the box has incorrect information on the back. They've got screenshots that never existed in the game." You're like, "Really? I got to check this box out that has a screenshot from before the game was released, and that content got cut." So I get a box in hand, and you come to find out, oh, there was actually other things that were pack-ins in the box, and there's these sheets of paper, and this just like slowly accumulates to, I would like to have what was given to the buyer, when they went to Toys R Us back in the 80s, the late 80s. So yeah, we collected all that hardware and software and printed material, and then I was ready to start experiencing these games. But just like you mentioned, you have to be able to capture the old hardware if you're playing on it, and you also have to be able to play it in the way it was intended. So I'm playing it on a cathode ray tube, a big old box TV, and I've amassed a dozen of these things because sometimes they stop working, and so you got to fix them. But so do the NESs, so do the consoles. One day we were playing, there's a couple of versions of the Nintendo Entertainment System. One day we were playing a game, the next day I turned it on and it just didn't work anymore. I as an electrical engineer, I took the thing apart, brought it up to my benchtop, and diagnosed it with a bad CPU. And you can't, there's no replacements for CPUs unless you get a donor CPU from hopefully another console that is broken in a different way. So yes, over the last, I think I started streaming back in 2018. Over the last 6 years, these types of things continue to happen. We went to go play Gyromite, one of the earliest released games, probably the earliest released game on the NES in North America. And we went to use Rob the Robot, and it just wouldn't work. It couldn't lift the pieces. It couldn't play the game right. So we had to disassemble Rob, diagnose the failure, correct the failure, all in order to play this game for what? What did we play it? 5 hours, something like that, It took us days of work to get that experience. So yeah, I I think you've made me think about this for the first time, but one of the legacy portions is not only giving people that first experience, what it's like, but giving my time and my abilities to giving people the access to the original hardware. And just what Nolan brought up earlier, I have the ability to make these hardware platforms to continue to be available for the at least my foreseeable future. And I see us going that way. We've been scanning in manuals. I've done almost 200 of them now. And we've been fixing hardware. We've been, yeah, showing maps and just like you said, all the ephemera, Nintendo Power booklets that come inside. We've been showing all this stuff on stream and giving that audience the idea of what it was like to play these games back in the 80s. Yeah, true real game preservation. Well, let's talk about the streaming side of things here, Nolan. What was your initial motivation for starting to stream?
Yeah. So the pandemic was was a big motivator to stream. So I initially I did a couple one-offs in 2020. Um, just sort of a like, you know, stop by, let's chat. And then started actually doing my weekly streams in 2021. Actually, I think it was the last day that Mario 35 was available. So it would have been March 31st, 2021. And got, I think, 3 wins that stream. It was very good. It was fun. And again, it like started off as a way for like, hey, people in my life, I'm gonna be here at this time, stop by. Uh, way to catch up with friends. And so I started doing my wonderful Wednesday streams. And yeah, I don't know. It slowly changed from like my IRL friends into new friends that I've made on the internet through streaming and Discord and everything, stopping by, and also just kind of randos. And so now I have like a great community of Twitch streamer friends through that, and I just really like doing it. It's a lot of fun for me. I get to, I've got a busy schedule, so I have to like schedule in times to actually play games, and that's another component. But it's like, yeah, here's things that I want to play or replay or, um, you know, learn to speed run or do a challenge run of like do a Nuzlocke run. And so it's just been super fun to do that. And yeah, I also stole something from my friend Jeannie, who is also a streamer, and she said, uh, if I'm taking up space on the internet, I should be paying it forward. So I always have a fundraiser going during my streams, got something different every month or two, different charity that I'm raising money for, and I, match all the donations myself so that we can sort of expand that reach. It's never a lot of money, but I still think that it's better than not fundraising.
You want to tell us about some of the charities that you've supported?
Sure. So let's see. There's been a lot of them over the years. I've helped support Able Gamers, which is an organization that uh, makes it easier for people with disabilities to play games, providing support and hardware and things. I have supported Black and Pink, which is a prison abolitionist organization. Um, I've supported the Trevor Project, and the Marsha P. Johnson Institute and the Trans Women of Color Collective, which are focused on supporting queer people and people of color. Uh, right now, I've got one running for RAICES, RAICES, which is an organization in Texas that does a lot of national level work to support immigrants and refugees, which seems very important right now, given the state of the U.S. Politics. I've supported medical aid for Palestinians. I don't know. Uh, I think that sort of I try and find causes that are both important to me and timely because I've found that people generally are more willing to donate when there's something that is, uh, directly front of mind, given the hellscape that we usually inhabit. So I just think that that's a great way to turn my stream, which I'm not really trying to like grow in any sort of way. I'm not interested in doing that as a living. but turn it into something that's a little bit more positive in the world.
That's great. You don't see a monthly charity very often in a Twitch stream, so excellent work. Do you have long-term goals for your channel, though?
Uh, Not really. I don't know. I assume it'll stop at some point. But yeah, I try to do once or twice a week. I've certainly, whatever, taken time off for travel and stuff like that. It's more just fun for me. But yeah, I don't know. It's uh, a way to connect with people, and so as long as I can keep doing that, then I'm very happy to do that. I think that if it became too big, then I would maybe not enjoy it as much. So right now I'm glad where it's at a size where I can like read every message that's coming through, get to know some new people occasionally. I don't know, and just sort of hang out.
I think something that I don't know. I'm sure it's occurred to you to think about, but I think you occupy a unique space on Twitch, and so you know your streams are not just fun for you, but it offers a place for others to talk to a developer of games who's giving feedback on games. Then you add the piece where you're a queer man, so you can actually welcome that in chat because there's a lot of times that you enter larger streamers who are like, don't mention politics, religion, or any sort of identity stuff, right? And I think you offer a space where you have the game side, you have some of the political side, you have yourself, and I think you're underselling yourself by saying that your stream is just you having fun.
I appreciate that. And yeah, as I I love to hear that it is a well curated space because that is something that I do take seriously. Um, and making sure that people do feel welcome. And yeah, my politics are pretty upfront and in a box in the lower right corner of my stream. So there's no confusion. But yeah, I think that that is also part of me enjoying the stream, right? Is having a place where people can come and chat about things that are important in their lives, or if they just need a place to kind of chill out, then they can do that. Um, if they want to hear some capital O opinions on games, I have plenty of those. So we can chat about, game development and game design and anything. So I try and make it, uh, I, I don't want to say produced necessarily, but I try and make sure that every stream is like a good show, right? I put some thought into what will make a good stream game, what will be compelling for me to talk about, what will be interesting to watch, what monster plush of the week am I gonna have? Are there other things that can help make it exciting for people to come by? Because I never want to be someone who just is like, okay, it's 12 hours. And for these 30 minutes, you're going to watch me eat on stream and put up a TV show, right? Like, that's just not the kind of streamer I want to be. I want to make sure that it feels like it is something that is sort of tight and uh, consumable and interesting the whole way through.
There any other criteria you have for what you play on stream? Like what makes a good and bad game?
Yeah, so this is maybe a me thing, but I don't really enjoy watching people do first playthroughs of things. And I know that that's like 90% of streams and let's plays. Uh, I feel like you don't really get to the interesting parts of games if you're only seeing your first reactions and hot takes. And so I don't like necessarily doing that for myself. There are occasions where I've done that, but it's usually part of a like bigger series. It'll be like, okay, so I've like Bayonetta 3 is coming out, so I'm replaying the first two Bayonettas on stream, and then we'll play the third one, right? I did the same thing with Pikmin, and where I think I did a Pikmin randomizer before Pikmin 4. So there's like some connective tissue where it's okay, I can bring a more nuanced perspective to the game I'm about to play. So that's something that I think about, right? Like I like replaying games, I like doing critical plays where you're looking at the themes of them, replaying games to see like, I remember liking this 10 years ago. How did it hold up? Or doing speedruns, challenge runs, things where you learn more about a game than you would on your first playthrough. So that's something I definitely look at. But I don't know. I also think about themes. Like I just, did spooky games for October, right? So that's how we played Mika and the Witch's Mountain and Nightmare Cart and Dredge. Which I liked those games a lot, so that was fun, and not something that I necessarily would have played if not for the stream. I try and get feedback from chat to be like, hey, is this interesting? Most people don't have strong opinions, but if they do, then I make sure to listen to that. And I don't know, just sort of, I'm planning out a unit, I guess, on doing like 4-dimensional games. And so I look at that and I have a list of games that I think might make a good stream game, and try and like connect them together so it's not just, here's a random game, we're playing it today because I've got time to fill.
Do you play games differently on stream versus off stream? Like, would you do challenge runs if you're playing off stream or randomizers off stream?
I 100% play games differently on stream than off stream. I mean, that's also what makes a good stream game, I think, is I when you got to read through a bunch of text, it slows a game down, and I think sometimes can make a game much worse if you have to sit with it for much longer. Um, so, like, I'm playing through Mario and Luigi Brothership right now, and that would be just awful to play on stream, I think, because there's so much text, and it's somewhat unnecessary, and being able to click through it and read it at my pace versus a like reading aloud pace is much more enjoyable, bearable. So that's one thing. For speedruns and challenge runs, I do sometimes, but now I save them for stream, right? Because they've sort of become like a stream thing, which are inherently interesting. There's a dramatic aspect to them. So generally more that's shifted. But yeah, I don't know. It depends again. Sometimes I'll do like test runs of things, but again, that's for stream. Um, yeah, but no, it absolutely. There's games where on stream I make sure that I am like present in the game and what's happening. And there's a lot of games that I've been playing recently that, because every game is open world now, where it's just like, well, I don't know. I don't really have to be paying attention to this. I'll put on a podcast or even a TV show at the same time and run through this big empty world and do a bunch of boring side quests. So that's something that I will do differently when I'm playing off stream. Turn off the music, maybe. So, because these 100-hour games have about 10 hours of music.
Regarding challenge runs and sometimes the crowds that can come along with them, what are your thoughts on and what are your thoughts on, and have you been approached by like the Get Good crowd, the crowd that comes in and you have to how do I want to say that?
You can't play the game wrong, right?
Yeah, exactly. You have to show up to Twitch, and just like Ryan said, you can't play the game wrong. Yeah.
Right. Well, that's another reason why I don't like playing games for the first time on Twitch, because there are people who come by and like either want you to play their way or uh, will think that they're not giving you a hint, but are very obviously giving you a hint. And they're like, not to spoil anything, but you may want to look behind the bookcase. And it's like, come on, dude. Like, why are we doing this? So if it's something that I want to experience by myself for the first time, then it not going to play it on Twitch. I have encountered people who come in and ask me to do it a certain way. But if I have my own experience with the game and my own knowledge of the game, right, then I can navigate that a whole lot better. And honestly, I've mainly had the opposite when I've been learning speedruns, is people who come in and they're like, I just go around, like, I'm the world record holder in this game, and I just go around on Twitch and see if I can help anyone. And it's like, okay, sure, if that's how you want to spend your time, welcome in. You can join me on my journey of learning the speedrun game. And I'm generally not interested in like, getting the world record on anything. I set my own goals of what I think is reasonable for me to do, both in terms of skill and time investment. But yeah, it's great to have that when it happens. Sometimes they're right about the way you should be playing the game. But yeah, it's definitely a conversation.
Which can be a magical place sometimes. When people come, it's just sometimes it's the right people at the right time, and it can be wonderful.
Hmm.
On the lighter side of things, the plush of the week. How did you come up with that idea? How many plushies do you have?
Don't ask me that.
Which ones? What's the plushie of the week this week?
Ooh, okay, so yeah, every week I do a monster plush of the week. And I started that because I just had a lot of plushes, and I think it started off as the Pokemon plush of the week, actually, when I was playing a lot of Pokemon. And so I just had a lot of Pokemon plushes, and it's like, here's a Pokemon plush of the week. And then I kept it going as just a monster plush of the week, dropped the pocket, because I have a lot of them and like them and thought it was fun to show them off. Let's see. This week, this last week was Big the Cat, because I was finishing up Dredge, which is a fishing game, and Big the Cat has a fishing pole in the plush that I have. So again, there's some sort of thematic resonance, although not every game has direct plushes. If I'm like playing Pikmin, then I have a million Pikmin plushes, and I'll bring them out. But for something like Dredge, I have to do a little bit of uh, thinking about, like, okay, what's something that is both sort of aesthetically similar and thematically similar.
How many do you have?
I mean, I haven't counted them, but I would guess around 100.
That's it? I actually thought you'd have more.
I only have an 800 square foot apartment, so there's only so much room where things can go.
Do
But
they
For
do they
your
rotate into
100
storage?
roommates.
Yeah.
they do, yeah, I do rotate them in and out. So,
One of the maybe understated parts of your streams is your fashion. I mentioned your shirt earlier. You're always wearing
or lack
something.
thereof.
Yeah, but you're always wearing something fun. Sometimes very very wild. It often matches. Um, is that what you're always wearing, or do you just do that for stream?
That is what I'm always wearing. I mean, for the most part, uh I have more muted, ridiculous shirts for things like teaching and when I have to like present government contracts and things, but generally that's what I'm wearing. Yes. And love a power clash, as many different patterns as I can get going at the same time.
I'm gonna try to incorporate the phrase "muted ridiculous blank" into my into my life more now that I've heard you say that.
I like to say that I dress like a stolen car, which is a line from The Muppet Show when they have Elton John on, and and Sam the Eagle is not having it, not a fan of Elton John, and so Kermit the Frog is like, oh, actually he's a very important artist, and he's done all these things, and Sam goes, then why does he dress like a stolen car? I just thought that was perfect.
Incredible.
I want to get into some more Nolan lore. What's your gaming background? I think you sort of mentioned that your parents were not super supportive when you were younger, and your siblings gave you a hard time for it. But how did you afford a secret Game Boy?
I mean, that was later. But yeah, so I wouldn't say that my parents weren't supportive, but they uh, found it to be a distraction. And I think certainly for my older brothers it was. Um, and maybe I was better at hiding the distraction. Um, but yeah, it's I think it was more common back then, right? Like I knew other people who just like didn't have game systems or whatever. I think now it's pretty much unheard of. I think most households have at least one game system. So that's kind of a sign of, a shifting era. But yeah, no, it's probably middle school when I, you know, saved up enough money and went. I think my parents were out of town, and I convinced my babysitter to take me to Best Buy, and I bought a secret Game Boy. Yeah. So I don't know. My that's sort of where my love of gaming started, right? Like my brother had a Game Boy, and so I would play. I think the first game I played was probably Legend of Zelda: Link's Awakening. Probably. I mean, but also I think like Tetris was around in Super Mario Land, and I think, a Tiny Toons games, Tiny Toons Adventures was sort of the ones we had. But yeah, I mean, Pokemon was like the game for me. Played it since Red and Blue, still love it, have played all of the games, still playing them. And so that was sort of, I think, what helped shape my love of games. Um, and yeah, then once I got to college, I was like, okay, I'm buying a bunch of game systems, right? So I like bought like a Nintendo 64 and stuff and started going through my backlog um, to sort of catch up. And now I I understand I might have a over-indexed history with games, because a lot of people I talk to now who grew up with games are like, "Oh yeah, I just played a couple of them." And I'm like, "I've played all of them." So that's interesting. I had a big list, and I still kind of play a bunch of games. And there's a huge list of games that I like to to check out that are in the zeitgeist. I just like being in the conversation. So I don't know. That's, I guess, my gaming background. And my parents now are totally cool with games. They're supportive of me and my game lifestyle.
Tell us about your master's project.
Sure. Okay. So I got my master's degree in game design, and for my master's thesis, right, we were making a game, and it actually started out where I was making the code name that I had for it was DigiPhysmon, for digital physical monsters. And the idea was it was a game that you'd play on your phone, and it would be affected by the real world. You could go around and find digital monsters. Um, and then everyone left my team because they didn't like that idea. This was about a year or two before Pokemon Go came out, and I was like, I had it. This was all like this is all that I wanted to do. Um, and I had a background at that point in sort of location-based augmented reality mobile games. I worked on a game, a tie-in game for Halo 4 called 7-Eleven Presents Halo 4 King of the Hill Fueled by Mountain Dew. Which the idea was you like went to real life 7-Elevens and used your phone to like reload on bottles of Mountain Dew and bags of Doritos. You had to scan them, and so I was like in charge of making the like scanning algorithm and flow to like once you were in the 7-Eleven. So this is something that I was like fairly confident that I could do, but nobody wanted to work on that project with me, which is too bad. So I ended up joining another team that I had a lot of fun with. But we were making a horror game, and I don't do well with horror, so this was an interesting experience to me. But it was great to work on. It was an online thriller, is what we were calling it. The idea is everyone was a mannequin, and one of you became an evil mannequin who betrayed the other ones. So it was like this. You would like kind of do these short teleport steps around because mannequins don't walk, obviously, and you had to basically pretend to be mannequins while another player was trying to figure out who, they were. So it was this kind of like cat and mouse hide and seek game, but it was called The Curse of Mannequin Island. And what was cool is we got invited to go show it at the Tokyo Game Show in 2015. So I got to fly to Japan and show off a game I made, and all of my dreams came true when I was 25.
What's a non-video game hobby you have?
Yeah, so I like theater a lot. I am a reformed theater kid. So I see, Broadway shows. I like traveling a lot. I just went to Sicily a couple of weeks ago. I'm going to Cuba in March. So a lot of fun trips there. I like breweries. I don't know. I go check out local breweries with my friends. Um, come from a beer family, so.
I know your dad has one.
Mm-hmm.
You got to give some recommendations. So Belmont also wanted to know some beers to check
Mhm.
out.
I mean, okay, so definitely check out my dad's brewery, which is Dual Citizen Brewing Company in St. Paul, Minnesota. So if you're ever around there, check them out. They do not ship out of state. So gotta go there. But yeah, it's good beer. Um, they also are very politically minded, so I maybe come by it honestly. They had the largest watch party for the Walls Vance debate in the country, which is just kind of interesting. And they also have a dual purpose uh, fundraising thing. So, but yeah, so if you don't like beer, there's still reasons to go there. But yeah, I mean, I guess it depends where you are. It depends on the season. I don't know. I like a lot of beers, so um, I don't know. I've been enjoying there's a Coney Island Merman IPA that I've been enjoying lately. That's what's in my fridge right now. But there's different beers that don't ship out of state, so I kind of always like to find out whatever brewery is local to wherever I go. When I was recently in Montgomery, Alabama, I tracked down the one brewery which is there, and apparently it's one of two cities or two capitals in the U.S. that only has one brewery in it.
What's the other one? And when are you going?
South Dakota, and probably not anytime soon. Sorry, South Dakota. I grew up in Minnesota, so I have been there before, and I have seen what I need to see.
What's something that everybody should know about you?
Whoa. I feel like I tell everyone everything about me, but I don't know. I have a beard. What most people tend to remember. Yeah, I don't know. Let me twist that a little bit. I think my like guiding principle right now is that you should solve real problems, not imaginary problems, right? And so this is applicable in a lot of places in my life. Um, whether it's like, let's talk game dev. A lot of times you'll be like, oh, I have this, whatever, I have a model that I need to go in. Should I like optimize it in this way, or how's it gonna work? There's no reason to do it that way. You don't need to like pre-plan for optimization. You should just put something in, and then if it doesn't work, then you have a real problem that you can fix, and you'll know if you solved it. Whereas if you try and optimize for something where you don't know if it works or not, then you don't know if you've actually solved a problem. This is, something that I see a lot with development for software and for other projects, right? Is um, people try and create a problem that they can solve before there's actually any problem. And people like to do a lot of work for no reason. So, I don't know. I think that this also applies to politics, right? Where there's, oh, there's a lot of violent crime, so we have to crack down on border control. And it's like, well, is there actually? No, if you look at the statistics, then it's been going down steadily for years. So you've invented an imaginary problem, and now we're wasting all of our time trying to solve an imaginary problem when there's plenty of real problems we could be solving. So do that. Sometimes it is tricky to identify what the real problem is. I will grant you that. But better than wasting all of your time and money and resources and energy on something that may or may not affect you.
What are some support mechanisms you have in your life?
My friends and family, I guess. I like to go out with my friends a lot and go to events. Right, that's always a fun way to just blow off some steam. Um, group chats with my family, things like that. And then also, I don't know, I like I like traveling, so it helps you take you out of your situation, um, and give you perspective on what your life is and what your situation is.
What's it like doing this podcast?
It's very enjoyable. I don't necessarily want to be someone who does a weekly podcast because I feel like a lot of time you gotta reach for what you're gonna do. Um, and I don't know, that's no offense to people who do weekly podcasts, but I don't know. I never want to be in a situation where I'm like trying to fill time. And so I think that like this one is great because we can schedule when we want, um, and only get to choose interesting people and do it that way. And also, I don't have to do any of the editing or release, so it's really great for me. I just get to show up and talk.
Yeah, I mean, I've seen you, or I guess heard you on a number of pods, and I think I actually want to include those Nintendo Rewind streams you do, which is sort of like a live pod on Twitch. It seems to come pretty naturally to you. Do you think that's the theater, or just in general that's your personality?
I mean, I think it's the other way around. Yeah, it's just my personality. I've always been pretty gregarious and outspoken and uh thoughtful and handsome and kind. So that drew me to the theater. I was always like confident on stage. And it was fun for me, and I think there's the same, with streaming and teaching also, right? Like I have no problem standing up and speaking confidently in front of a group of people, uh, and podcasts too. So it's just something that I am lucky enough to be good at.
When did you realize that this would work?
Oh, um, is it working? That's great to learn. So I guess right now, no, it's I do think that from like the first interview that we did, I was kind of blown away by how interesting, you know, Ben was and how interesting each of our guests were, and how if you just, you know, dig a tiny bit, then there's so much to learn about people. And so that was really, and we kind of spun this up based on the half joke that the interviews are the best part of the Dev Game Club podcast. And so we knew there was kind of something there, but it just letting people talk about themselves, I think you learn so much about themselves and also a little bit about yourself. Because you're like, oh, I also think that, or I definitely do not think that.
We did solicit questions from people in the Discord.
Oh,
I specifically asked people we interviewed, and then Kaon sort of expanded.
sure, let's hear them.
All right, so this is from Ben. How did you find Dev Game Club?
It's the same old story as a lot of people. I'm pretty sure it was the FF9 podcast. Jason Schreier called it out on Kotaku.
He also wanted to know, have you ever played along with any of the games?
I have played along with some of the games. Certainly the Pokemon one. I don't know, there's some others as well. I used to do it more, and I probably will in the future again, but have been pretty busy this last year, so but yeah, no, it's fun.
Yeah, Mystery Dip actually wrote in. He said, how has your teaching influenced your game development and vice versa?
Oh, that's a very good question. Certainly game development influencing teaching. I've realized that education is a game. And so teaching a class is just designing a game, right? You're giving a curriculum and you have a rubric that they have to complete to get a good grade, and they can do that or not. So that has been an interesting realization for me, especially because I'm someone who did very well in school with usually not too much effort, and I was like, oh, okay, it's extremely gamified, and that's sort of what what pulled me through. Interesting. Uh, in terms of teaching for game development, I also think that I've gotten better at uh, doing playtests, right? And sort of figuring out what's the best way to get people up to speed on what this game is and what exactly you want them to know before starting to play. And just sort of working with a lot of students over the years, you learn the different types of ways that people learn and retain information. And so I think that I've gotten a lot better at making my games more approachable in that way.
We got one from Lost Lake. He says, if you were not programming, what kind of job would you imagine that you'd be doing?
That's also a good question. I don't know, maybe something with writing. I like writing, but maybe writing books or journalism. Could see myself as interviewing people, learning stuff, writing it up. I don't know, also probably project management. I'm good at. I could see just doing that sort of thing for like a tech company. I don't know, a lot of different things.
Seems like you'd stay down the creative path for the most part, it seems.
Yeah. I mean, I certainly wouldn't want to, I don't know, completely change everything. Yeah, it's like, I don't want to say if I wasn't programming, I'd be completely unhappy. That seems like an unproductive train of thought.
So I have a couple from Michael. The first was, what's your first gaming memory? And you might have actually mentioned this previously about the Game Boy, but I don't know if that was your first memory or.
Yeah. It might have been, yeah, I think probably Legend of Zelda Link's Awakening is early. I also remember my brothers playing Prophecy Viking Child, which is an MS-DOS game. Yeah, that probably was it.
And then in a quite a good trolling question for you from him too. Can you list your least interesting, most boring types of streams and then rank order them for us?
Oh no. Well, if I think that it's not going to be interesting, then I don't do it because I don't want to just put out content for no reason.
You don't want to work through the list right now?
Uh, my least interesting streams. Let's see. There's certainly been streams where nobody's shown up. I did do a game dev stream once, while making Silly Seance. I don't think that was very successful. I'm trying to think. It's otherwise just like games that people don't like as much as I do. So
From Kyle, what is your advice to hopeful indie hobbyist game devs?
just make a game. I don't know. Like, don't be hopeful. Just start making it. Keep it small, release it, then you're a game maker.
Belmont sent us like a bunch. He sort of wanted to comment or question about your speed running. You know, how do you keep to it? Because he often finds himself that doing the same run hour after hour is sort of miserable for him.
Oh, then don't do it. I don't know. Like that's my advice there. I certainly have stopped games when they're not interesting to me anymore, when I'm not enjoying the speedrunning. So I guess that's just my natural course is when I'm still like making some progress or have new things to try, or you know, am close enough to something that I think I can kind of get it, then I keep doing it. I'm definitely not someone who just bashes my head against the wall over and over again. Even in like Dark Souls bosses or something, I'll try it 3 times, and if I'm not making significant progress, then I back out and try something else, right? Whether it's changing my loadout, or growing some levels, or respecking, or whatever it is. Don't. If I'm not enjoying it, I'm not gonna keep doing it.
He'd like to know about your time at the NYU Game Center. He listens to a podcast that features Jesse Fuchs, and he makes the game libraries there seem amazing.
Yeah, Jesse Fuchs is awesome. Uh, I mean, I had a great time interacting with, real game developers who are huge in the world of indie game dev, and got to learn a lot. I think with any grad program, you need to have very specific goals of what you want to get out of it. And there's very specific conditions under which you should go to grad school. And I think, I say this as someone who teaches in grad school, I think most people shouldn't go to grad school. And it's kind of a scam. But again, if you like need it for a further job, like teaching, or if you're going to get your PhD or something like that, then you got to go to grad school. If you, have a specific goal of something you want to make, uh, or, network or get involved in a, a certain industry, then that's maybe a good reason. And if you're not going to get any student debt from it, then you should consider going to grad school. Otherwise, it's really not necessary, and in fact exists to take your money. And a lot of grad programs are pretty self-directed, so if you don't know what you want, then you're not going to get a lot out of it. The game library is cool, though. I don't know. It's a bunch of games, and you can go play them. And I would.
Um, he also had the question about the beer. And then his last one is, how does it feel to be a main voice in a Discord around game dev, being a developer yourself, where you talk to people like himself who are not game developers?
Well, the phrase main voice in a Discord is actually very mean, and I resent that. God, yeah, I was on another podcast, and someone said that I was extremely active in the Discord, and I was like, oh no, I have to change my entire life. That's that's a terrible thing to be known for. Yeah, I don't know. It's fun. Whatever. I don't. Everyone's got something different that they bring to it. I happen to make games. Uh, I have a perspective on it that's very different from, the devs of Dev Game Club. So that's also interesting to hear. Happy to share my experience and happy to learn from people who have different opinions on it.
Speaking of those devs at Dev Game Club, can you tell us a game you think they should play?
I mean,
You had to know this was coming.
I know, and I have like a couple answers, but I think I'm going with Pokemon Gold and Silver. I really think that they should go back, play the sequels. It's been long enough. Maybe even Heart Gold and Heart Silver, which are possibly the greatest games in the Pokemon catalog. Because I think that they'd super enjoy them. And there's enough new stuff that I thought they maybe should have just started with those if they're only going to play one. But I think they'd have more to talk about, more to enjoy, and it's been long enough that they can sort of reminisce on how they fell in love with Pokemon the first time.
What's a pillar or takeaway from their podcast?
I think that something that I repeatedly am reminded that I enjoy about it is just like be specific, talk about things in depth. It's way more fun than giving your surface level opinions in it. And the fact that they, have 4 episodes per game or whatever allows them to go really, really deep into a game. And, they have a nice structure where they kind of spiral into the mechanics and get to, they don't always finish the games, which is a whole other conversation. And some games, I think, do need to be played to completion to have a full opinion of them. But even from what they do, the way that they approach it is, I think, really great for analysis and really great to listen to.
Have you taken anything they've talked about or mentioned in the podcast in your design ethos for yourself, or when you play games?
Kinda, not really. No, yes, I guess. No, I think it's really interesting to hear the industry perspective on game design because I come at it uh, from an indie side, right, and a formal indie side, which is a lot more about art and personal expression, right, than making a game for a million people. And so hearing the systems and mechanisms that they have in place and that they suspect the games, that they're playing had in place in development, I think is very interesting. It's not something that I directly apply, but it is something that I think about in terms of, if I'm building my own studio, what are things that I can steal? What are pitfalls I can try to avoid? And, what are maybe better ways that I can try and make games?
You streamed in the Defeating Games for Charity event in January of 2024. What are your thoughts on the event and your experience in participating in it?
I thought it was a lot of fun. It, came together kind of quickly, but there was a lot of excitement around it, and so it was very enjoyable to see all of these different people who had never really worked together, who just kind of knew each other on the internet, team up and put it on, and it was pretty successful. I think it did uh, like raise a significant percentage of uh, what we raised was like almost half of what the yearly operating budget for the Video Game History Foundation is. So I think like it actually was incredibly impactful towards the organization, and I had a great time personally because I've always kind of wanted to be on like a games done quick or something like that, and so it was if they don't let you in, then you make your own.
So this one I wanted to get in there. When are you two doing the Keep Talking and No One Explodes dual stream?
I can probably commit to that. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely.
I'm excited because it's going to be hilarious. I mean, I think you guys will be really good, but the first time it goes wrong, it's going to go real sideways, and I can't wait.
I think in the first match, I'm going to be mad at Kaon. I think we're still going to win, but I think I am going to be like, I clearly said it's an Octothorpe, and you didn't understand what I was saying. That is my prediction.
Hashtag Octothorpe.
Well, that's just redundant.
Yeah.
Your non-game stuff that you've helped develop, and I'm talking about your tarot cards and the I'm gonna get this right. The 3D image. I don't want to say it's a picture frame. It's not a picture frame. What is it, Nolan? Tell me exactly. So
Sure,
I
it's a
don't
3D
die.
photo frame. Yeah, a holographic display.
Holographic display. Go ahead. Tell us about those and what got you into those, or are those just like a sideline thing, or is that something you want to keep doing?
So the 3D photo frame is with a company called Looking Glass. They are a client of mine, and I'm not continuing with them, although I was with them for 8 years. But yeah, at the end of this year, I'm moving on to other stuff and hopefully focusing on my game studio a little bit more. Tarot thing is mine, so I have a tarot bot that I made with friends. This also is something that spun out of my weekly to fortnightly board games and bars nights, where my friend was doing tarot readings, but then there's a bunch of different decks and stuff, and don't want to carry them around, so made a little bot for Slack, for our friend Slack. And it's grown since then. So it has a couple thousand users on Discord, and then it's been on Tumblr, Twitter, although those are shut down now. Co-host also shut down now. It's on Blue Sky. That's still running. there's some other ones too. I don't know. But it keeps getting bigger. And so I like last year refactored it, made it a public API. So that's like what all the bots run off of now. And it does like daily readings and specific prompts. If you want to ask it, it'll return a card. And then got my friend Yasmin, who's very talented, to do a custom deck. So there's 78 custom cards that we made. And so now the bot returns those, or you can also ask it to do the Rider-Waite-Smith deck, which is a traditional tarot deck. And now we're running a Kickstarter to print the physical deck. Yeah, I don't know. It's just something that we keep adding on to as we find people are interested in it, right? So it's like nothing that we've ever really advertised until now, but we found that people have started using it in their daily practice, and we try and talk to those people, and sometimes people just be like, hey, can it do this? And I'll be like, yeah, I'll add in that feature. Why not? It's all, we're not trying to make money off of it. It's something that we use ourselves, and then also have found people who like using it, and so just expanded it based on that. And now it's actually a pretty sophisticated tech stack, which is interesting for maintaining, but I try and keep it relatively, well scoped. So I don't know. It's a super fun thing to do. I hope we get this tarot deck Kickstarter going. It'll be over by the time this comes out, so find out if it happened or not. But yeah, it's just another side project. I always have a million things that I'm working on, so that one is fun to do. Oh, we also recently added an RSS feed.
So go get your tarot cards.
Yeah.
Hey man, thank you for agreeing to do this in general, and then specifically for letting me grill you with a million questions.
Yeah, absolutely. It was fun. I don't know. I'm always happy to chat about everything. So,
Can you tell us where we can find you? And again, I want to thank you for agreeing to do this and sifting through some Discord questions, as well as taking some time to do some background research yourself, including playing all of Nolan's games. So thank you.
Well, hey, thank you for having me. I appreciate the offer to be here, and it was great chatting with you, Nolan and Ryan. You can find me, probably easiest is at twitch.tv/KAEON, where you can see a bunch of links to my other socials there. And I'm usually there a few nights a week playing some Nintendo Entertainment System games.
Nolan, where can we find you, your games?
yeah, thanks again, Kaon. You did great. I think you could probably take over for me. So, welcome your new co-host. But yeah, if you want to hear more of me, you can find me on Twitch at twitch.tv/CalamityNolan. We, do all sorts of fun games and fundraising there, as I mentioned. And then you can find my games at upatnight.games. Thanks for listening to this episode of Discord Game Club, Just Rhetoric. We want to thank Brett and Tim for making the Dev Game Club podcast and for giving us a slot in their release feed. We also want to thank Mark and Artemage for starting the Discord Game Club podcast. Go listen to those episodes if you haven't already. If you'd like to hear more interviews like these, let us know. You can find us in the Dev Game Club Discord, where Calamity Nolan and Biostats. Goodbye! Second, I'm in the middle of a Pokemon battle.
Come on. Win. You can do it.
I'm working on it. Although the app just froze, so now I have to rejoin before it times me out. It's not looking good for me, I would say, but there is a chance. All right, this is not going to go well for me. Well, really, I got nothing. I got a terrible draw, so it's going to be slow, and I just got the card that would have turned it around. But after my Pokemon died, so it's not going great, is what I would say. Here the f is my Pikachu. All right, there's a chance. I lost. I just got my Pikachu EX too late. So I went down swinging, but there's no once they like get set up, then there's really no way to come back unless they misplay.